This really happened to me, and even now my hands remember the weight of the program booklet I clenched that day. I don't tell it because I'm proud of how angry I got. I tell it because the truth came out anyway. They called me a dropout into a hot microphone inside Welsh Ryan Arena, purple lights washing over the aluminum stands, and my sister's mortarboard bobbing in front of me while the student speaker smirked at the podium. The word landed like a penny flicked into a quiet church. The chairs creaked, security's metal wands pecked at a bag nearby, and I stared down at the plastic CEO badge hanging on my lanyard, the laminate warm from my neck. I'd come to watch Sophia walk, but the message was meant for me. I was 42 and older than most mothers in that section, but right then I felt 13. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I wasn't there to be the center of anything. I was there because Sophia had asked me to sit where she could see me when she turned to find us. She'd circled our row number in purple highlighter on a screenshot, texted me at midnight like a kid planning a heist. Right corner, Mom sighed. See you. Sophia was the first in our family to walk across a stage like this. Evanston's old oaks holding the lake breeze just outside, the dunes around the Lakeville bright as a postcard. We'd eaten Lou Malnati's the night before, the kind of pizza that settles a whole day in your body, and I'd promised to keep the commentary to a minimum. The plan was to cry, to cheer, to take her to Pequod's for a second dinner if she wanted. That was all. But life had a habit of circling back to the places you were told you'd never belong. Before Sophia came to Northwestern, I started there anyway, arriving at 19 with a spiral notebook and a chip on my shoulder from Pilsen, thinking Lake Michigan looked like an ocean because all the horizons I knew had been made of brick. I didn't drop out because the work was too hard. I dropped out because everything else was harder. Our mother's insulin running out one awful winter, a landlord who'd lost our maintenance requests, and a professor who had looked over my shoulder and into my ideas like they were free samples at a grocery store. He was just Whitaker to me then, a faculty star with a razory beard and clear-framed glasses. He taught entrepreneurship like it was a charismatic disease. You could catch it from him, and then he'd walk away with the symptoms. I'd pitched a platform to help small grocers in neighborhoods like ours optimize their delivery routes, because Mr. Huerta down on 18th Street was wasting half a tank daily just figuring out where to drive next. Whitaker loved it. He put a hand on my notebook, told me my sketches had grit, and said if I could turn it into something that could get a City of Chicago pilot, he'd put me in front of donors. I didn't know donors were sharks outfitted in blue blazers. Weeks later, he asked for access to my shared doc to comment and introduced me to a visiting friend, a venture guy named Jason Rusk, who shook my hand and held on just a second too long, telling me I had found her eyes. When I asked Whitaker later what that meant, he said, "A mix of sleep deprivation and destiny." He laughed like we were co-conspirators. I laughed because I was 19. When my mother's A1C spiked, I took a leave to get her back on a routine. It was supposed to be 1 quarter. In that quarter, Whitaker's friend Rusk backed a pilot called Proxy Cart in a city I'd never lived in. I recognized the copy on their website because I'd written that copy between Pilsen night shifts and a bus ride that ended at Harold Washington Library. The file names they showed in screenshots, Streetlight 2_routes and bulk CSV batch, matched lines from the rough code I'd left on my school drive. When I confronted Whitaker, he smiled. They solved the problem. You had won, they had a team. He lowered his voice, as if offering me a kindness. Mara, you don't want to burn bridges. There might be a place for you there someday. But don't insinuate theft. I could help you if you let me. At 19, you can't imagine how long a sentence like that will echo. I left school to keep our rent paid, and my mother alive. Nights, I sorted packages at a FedEx just off Ashland, purple trucks droning under the highway, while my brain mapped routes for groceries I wasn't delivering. On Sundays, I set up laptops as a contractor at a loop office where everything smelled like polished concrete. Nobody in those buildings ever apologized for being late, because nobody ever had to choose between a bus and an Uber. I learned how to make do, how to coax sequel into telling me truths that would get me a raise, and how to disappear when certain men stood too close. I did not learn how to stop thinking like an owner. When Sophia got into Northwestern years later, I put every spare dollar into her textbooks. "You'll finish when you're ready," she said whenever I tried to make jokes about being a dropout. "Not if," I'd answer, "just when." It was a promise I didn't say out loud. By the time I turned 40, I'd built lakefront loop in a studio apartment above a bakery in Pilsen, where the smell of conscious rose through my vents at sunrise. It started with a Google Sheet and a borrowed API key. By the time the sheet had outgrown itself, I had 4 drivers using my routing dashboard to keep bodegas stocked in back of the yards without wasting a gallon. We stitched together a fleet from people who needed second chances. A dad who'd been laid off from CTA, a woman who'd lost custody and was clawing it back mile by mile, a kid who could reverse a van into an alley like he'd trained for it since birth. When the City of Chicago's Small Business Improvement Fund ran a pilot for microdistribution, my deck landed on a desk that didn't hate me. We got the pilot. We got a tiny grant. We got attention, too, some from investors who had watched Proxy Cart limp along and saw that grit and a map of alleys could beat a glossy logo. My badge said CEO after someone told me I needed a title to get in certain doors. I printed it myself at a shop near Roosevelt Station. The laminate felt like a dare. Sophia's boyfriend, Miles, couldn't stop praising it the first time he saw it. "So slick," he said, turning it over, his nails buffed, his smile a little dental commercial. His last name was Kent, which I learned later mattered to certain people, the way some last names are like key fobs for rooms you didn't know existed. He'd met Sophia in a media class and made her laugh, and I wanted to trust anybody who could make my sister look that light. "We're going to the Maldives after graduation," he told us one night at the Purple Pig on Michigan Avenue, like he was reading a line. He never asked how I'd built anything. He asked what it felt like to be my own boss, and then talked about a fellowship his dad could place him in. I told myself that was just kids. I told myself he'd learn to ask. When he stepped up to that podium at Welsh Ryan, wearing a student speaker sash, I thought I saw nerves, and I felt protective. He took the mic, thanked the faculty, thanked the donors, made a joke about dorm food, and then segued to a paragraph about perseverance. "We all know someone who quit when it got hard," he said, ignoring the scrape of chairs and the hush that fell like a dropped flag. He didn't look at me exactly, but to be honest, he didn't have to. But today is for those who stayed. Today is for those who didn't take shortcuts, who didn't run from accountability. Today is for finishers. Someone near me coughed in that way that's a word. Dropout. I felt heat rise from my chest to my scalp, that old fluorescent buzz of being 19 and realizing a gate you can't even see has still closed in your face. My hands found the CEO badge because your body will reach for proof when your name is turned into a punchline. The badge wasn't from Northwestern. It was from the vendor my company had become this spring. We'd won a small contract to help route last-mile deliveries around arena events in the North Shore, including game nights and, yes, graduation weekends. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that put my face on a screen. But it put me in a hallway the day the dean made a joke in the green room about glorified couriers. I'd heard it through a cracked door while confirming a load-out schedule with a stagehand named Eli. Eli rolled his eyes. "Every year the same smug stuff," he said, scribbling on his clipboard. That moment should have been the end of it. Instead, it was a match. I'm not proud of how quickly my anger can rehearse decades in a breath. From the stands, I swallowed what I wanted to shout and caught Sophia's eyes the second after she accepted her diploma. She looked jubilant, then puzzled. She didn't know yet what Miles had said. She wouldn't hear it until later, when the recording made the rounds. For now, she just saw me and mouthed hi, lifting the corner of her cap the way she did when she was 5 trying on our mother's church hat in the mirror before school. The difference was this time, the mirror was entire rows of people, and a microphone that knew how to humiliate. I let my breath out and let the angry part of me sit down. Then the practical part, the part I'd used to keep a company alive, stood up in its place. There are 2 kinds of problems. Those you can solve now and those you can solve for good. If I shouted, I'd become the story they wanted, the bitter dropout disrupting a ceremony. If I planned, I could become the story they couldn't drown out. By the time the college dean, Brad Whitaker, yes, the same, took the stage to bestow official congratulations, his beard thinner but his smile no less practiced, I'd remembered something I couldn't unknow. When power wants to insult you, it brings a microphone. When you want to answer, you bring receipts. I started collecting them the minute I left campus at 19. Back then it was paranoia. I kept email chains and drafts. I exported a pile of old .mbox files to a hard drive that moved with me from apartment to apartment. When ProxyCart rebranded as Rusk Mobility and opened a branch in River North, I took photos of a demo where their maps still used my old variable names. They changed them later, they always do. When Lakefront Loop won the city pilot, I documented the counter-speech. The way someone at a law firm with a partner named Kent had filed a FOIA request for all documentation related to award process and scoring for our grant. FOIA doesn't touch private universities like Northwestern, but it reaches public agencies, and it leaves breadcrumbs. The request came from Hargrove and Kent LLP. Funny coincidence, I thought. Or not. So when I watched the dean's eyes find the Kents in the VIP row and Miles grin like a man rehearsing being powerful, I stopped thinking about the taste of revenge and started thinking about the shape of it. Revenge wasn't a scene. It was a structure. First, you take away their alibi. Then you take away their audience. Finally, you take away their appetite for the game by changing the rules. I left the arena during a musical interlude, the band swelling a cover of Viva La Vida that felt hilariously misplaced, and walked the concourse where the vendor badges bleeped you through service doors. Mine opened one near the loading dock, where the air smelled like rubber and sweat. Eli spotted me. "Everything good?" he asked. I nodded. "Do you still have those audio checks?" I asked. He frowned. "From the rehearsal?" "Yeah, I save everything so nobody blames us when a trustee forgets how to hold a mic." "Why?" "Because I heard something backstage, and then I heard a student repeat it on stage, and I want to make sure I'm not inventing a pattern to make myself feel better." My voice shook. "It won't go anywhere without me. I just need to hear it." Eli chewed on his lip, then tugged his phone from a belt case. He was one of those wonderfully old-school techs, and thumbed to an app. "Everything's marked by timestamp," he said. He scrolled. A file labeled greenroom_remarks_1036 sat between housemix_tune_up and podium_mic_test. He looked at me to be sure. I nodded. He pressed play. "And let's not drag the program," a voice said, tinny through a directional mic, no off-script shout-outs. "We're not here to celebrate dropouts." A chuckle, soft, punchable. "Whitaker's." A second voice, Miles' eager lick of a smile in the words. "Funny you say that," he said. "I had a line about persistence. People love a foil." "Careful," Whitaker said, faux fatherly, faux warning. "But yes, keep it clean enough to make your father proud." I stared at Eli. He stopped the recording. "You didn't get that from me," he said. But anybody who thinks their words don't travel has never met an audio tech with a long memory. I thanked him and stepped into the light, the way people do when they've been in the dark long enough to remember what daylight can do. My hands were steady now. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because the hurt had a job. Sophia found me after the ceremony near Gate 2, the lake breeze kissing the sweaty air. She had her diploma like it was breakable, her hair in little waves she'd slept on, and tears she didn't bother hiding. "I did it," she said. "We did it." "We did," I said, and I meant it. I hugged her so hard I heard the soft crackle of the diploma tube. Miles appeared 2 beats later, perfect in a suit you wear once, his eyes bright with that performance high. He kissed Sophia's cheek, and then let his gaze slide to my badge. "Nice laminate," he said. "You know, they'll get you a real one if you ever, you know." He trailed off faux casual. "Finish." Sophia stiffened. "What?" she said. "I mean, graduates get different credentials," he said, and smiled, "and you have to admire someone who commits to their villainy that early in life. You'll love the Maldives. We leave Tuesday." Sophia looked at me. Maybe she thought I'd make a joke. I didn't. Miles, I said, and watched his name circle him like a leash. Did you run your speech by anyone? Just the anthology of my life, he said and laughed. Sophia didn't. And the dean, he added smaller. Sophia, I said. Go take photos with Mom by the wildcat statue. I'll be 2 minutes. She looked between us, then nodded, walking toward our mother who'd been brave enough to make it up the steps and had found shade by a pillar. When she was out of earshot, I stepped half a foot closer to Miles so the wind couldn't steal what I was about to say. You and your father filed a FOIA request to fish for dirt on my company's pilot. Your dean egged on your little joke just now, which means it's not a joke. It's a policy. You know the difference. He blinked. What are you talking about? Patterns, I said. And proof. I lifted my phone, thumbed the screen, and he watched his own rehearsal flicker in Eli's recording app. His smile faltered but didn't break. Cute, he said. You gonna what, cancel graduation? No, I said. I'm going to outlast it. Then I'm going to reframe it. Then I'm going to make sure the only title people remember from today is the resignation letter your dean sends. You think you can? Yes, I said. Because the thing about dropouts is, we know how to rebuild in the middle of collapse. It's our unfair advantage. I walked toward the parking lot, dialing a number I hadn't used in months. Her name was Lila Morales, a paralegal I'd met at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse when I'd gone to sit in the back of a hearing for Rusk Mobility's wage claim. One of their drivers had sued for being misclassified. Lila had a memory like a grudge and a laugh like a whistle. She picked up on the second ring. If you're calling on a Saturday, she said, somebody's about to have a worse Monday than they expected. 2 somebodies, I said. And a university. We met that evening at a table in the Palmer House Hilton lobby bar, all Tiffany glow and tourists. I laid out everything, the theft a lifetime ago, the rebrand, the timing, the FOIA requests, the recording. Lila listened with the careful face of someone building a timeline. Private university, she said, but public money touches them in a dozen places. Grant programs, tax abatements, municipal partnerships. Every time they talk to a public office, the door cracks open. Can we pry it? I asked. She grinned. I brought a crowbar. By the end of her old-fashioned and my seltzer, we had a list. 1. File a complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's Charitable Trust Bureau for any foundation Whitaker chaired, donations, use of funds, conflicts. 2. Submit targeted FOIAs to the City of Evanston and the Illinois Department of Commerce for Whitaker's emails with Rusk Mobility and Hargrove and Kent. 3. Ask a friendly at the Chicago Tribune, Lila's neighbor's cousin, because this is Chicago, to take a look once we had documents. 4. Seed false but plausible features in a memo to a tiny list, including one we would send to Whitaker through a third party, and see what showed up in Rusk Mobility's next deck. And 5, make sure any step we took protected Sophia, not jeopardized her. Why protect her? Lila asked, not unkindly. She's grown. She's mine, I said, and surprised myself with tears. And nothing about this is her fault. The next week was work, the kind of work that keeps your hands occupied so your heart doesn't explode. Lakefront Loop had a morning stand-up under the Blue Line in Pilsen, where the trains rattled like a sermon. I told my drivers we were about to scale 2 neighborhoods north. I told my developer, Janae, to implement the decoy features. I called one edge bind and the other lake time, and tucked them into internal notes that only went to a handful of people, including a mentor who sometimes played golf with Whitaker. I sent a polite email to the dean's office requesting a meeting about community partnerships, signed with a neutral title. I called my mother, checked her sugar numbers, and made sure she understood that we loved Sophia and that everything else was noise. She sighed and said, Mija, I trust you to fight fair and fight hard. On Wednesday, a lawyer from Hargrove and Kent, last name Levine, first name perfectly forgettable, called to ask about our city pilot. Just routine, he said. Transparency. Happy to be transparent, I answered. Just send me the list of clients you're representing and any conflicts related to Rusk Mobility. Silence, then a cough. We can't disclose clients. Then we can't disclose more than what's in the public file, I said and hung up and felt a small fix in my spine. On Thursday, a reporter named Dana from the Tribune emailed Lila back. Sounds potentially juicy, she wrote. Not your usual squeaky wheel. If you can document the timeline, we'll look. And yes, off record until on. People love to think journalists are wolves. Most are librarians with sharper pencils. They want the story to be true. Friday morning, Janae pinged me with a screenshot of Rusk Mobility's update on LinkedIn. Announcing lake time for last-mile campus logistics, the post said. A stock photo of a smiling student rolling a suitcase under spring trees. The caption used my exact phrase, bypass lakefront bottlenecks. Janae had embedded that in an internal memo never publicly posted, sent to 5 people. One was me. One was Janae. One was Lila, who swore on her abuela. One was our city contact, who replied from her personal phone. I didn't forward swear. And one was Whitaker, through the mentor who'd offered to pass the idea along. That mentor texted an apology 2 hours later. I thought he could help. I didn't know. We didn't scream. We filed. Lila walked the complaint to the Attorney General's office on LaSalle herself, because she believed in delivering news with eye contact. Dana began asking questions of the city of Evanston and got the kind of non-answer that smells like smoke. FOIA responses would take time, but we sent them anyway. Meanwhile, I called our arena contact, Eli's boss, a practical woman named Carrie, and asked if Lakefront Loop could buy 2 minutes of sponsor time on the big screen during Sunday's smaller departmental ceremony for communications grads. We don't normally, she began, and I said, we want to congratulate our drivers' families and one specific graduate named Sophia. We'll pay the standard rate. We'll keep it clean. She considered, did the easy math, and said, send the check. On Saturday morning, the day after the big all-school ceremony, Whitaker responded to my meeting request. Happy to discuss, he wrote. Quick coffee Sunday before comm? Always nice to see alumni invested in community. Dropout. I whispered at the word alumni and typed back. See you at 9 a.m. I'll bring donuts. I wore the CEO badge because it mattered to me, not to him. The badge opened the door to the same green room where he'd said the quiet part out loud. He stood when I entered, a politician's smile installed. Ms. Delgado, he said. So pleased. Donut. I held out a pink box from Dinkles, which my mother still swore by, and set it between us like a prop. He declined. I sat. He launched into a paragraph about ecosystem and synergy in town and gown. I let him talk until the rhythm of his self-praise became a metronome. Then I put my phone on the table, face down. I brought a recorder, I said. To be thorough. He blinked. Is this an interview? It's a courtesy, I said evenly. Dean Whitaker, do you know a firm called Hargrove and Kent? He paused, then smiled. I'm familiar with many firms. Do you know they filed a FOIA request inquiring into my company's pilot with the city of Chicago? If your firm is using public dollars, he said smoothly, then people asking questions is a virtue, Ms. Delgado. Did you advise a student speaker yesterday to keep his joke clean enough to make his father proud when referencing dropouts? He inhaled through his nose. I'm not sure It's rhetorical, I said. Because audio, like paper, has a memory. He folded his hands. Ms. Delgado, if this is about feelings, I can assure you. It's about patterns, I said, and slid a folder across the table. Inside, screenshots from Rusk Mobility's LinkedIn update using lake time, copies of my memo with edgebind and lake time watermarks, timestamps, a list of the 5 recipients, and a printed copy of an email from a city account. Redacted but distinct, mentioning a Mr. Kent, by name, requesting an off-record conversation about pilot scoring rubrics. I won't be threatened, he said, heat finally blooming under his words. Good, I said. Because I'm not threatening. I'm informing. The Tribune is asking questions. The Attorney General is aware. And in 2 hours, a screen in your arena is going to congratulate Sophia Delgado for finishing what I started. Using my name and my title, because you will not control my narrative with a snide aside. You'll be in the stands with everybody else when they see it. "Is that a promise?" he asked, smug back like we'd returned to the game he preferred. "It's a receipt," I said and stood. "Enjoy the donuts." I didn't wait for him to speak. I stepped into the corridor where the arena's concrete carries sound like a rumor. Outside, Evanston smelled like cut grass. Inside, the crew tested lights. My phone buzzed. "Dana, we got one email. City Spock says no wrongdoing, but admits routine contact with HNK. Can you go on record if we get more?" I typed, "Yes." At noon, communication grads filed into Welshrian for the smaller ceremony that belonged to Sophia's department. It felt kinder. Fewer people, clearer lines, faces you could actually see. My mother sat with a cushion. I sat on the aisle so I could get up without elbowing strangers. When the dean rose to welcome families, he kept his script clean. When the student speaker, someone else, thank God, told a story about losing a voice in a freshman singing class and finding it somewhere else, I let myself breathe. At the 45-minute mark, when the last row took their bows, the screen above the stage glowed. It flashed sponsor logos, then cut to a black card with white text, a motion graphic simple and sharp. Lakefront Loop congratulates the class of 2025. To Sofia Delgado, who finished. From Mara Delgado, who built. CEO, Lakefront Loop. See you on the south side. My mother squeezed my hand hard enough to bruise. People cheered because people love an earnest shout-out. You could feel the relief wash through our section like air conditioning after a heat wave. And then the camera, mischievous and very human, found me. The red light at the base of the lens winked, and there I was on the board, older woman in a thrifted navy sheath, hair frizzing from lake air, holding a badge that said CEO. The arena erupted again because the economy of attention loves a clear story, and because, for once, the mic had wandered into my hands. Whitaker sat 3 sections up. When he saw me on the screen, he clapped, performative. A man refused his preferred ending but committed to pretending it was his. He didn't see my phone until it buzzed again. Dana with a PDF. Attachment, Evanston FOIA, emails between Whitaker and H&K. I opened it. There he was. "Let's keep pressure on this pilot, friend of Rusk Mobility, see if we can learn scoring." Also, had a humorous line about dropouts in mind. "Do we think that's too much?" The reply. Witty but wise to keep it general. "Mr. Kent is very much in favor." I forwarded the PDF to myself 3 ways like a superstition. Then I texted it to Lila, who sent back a single emoji, a match. The Tribune article went live Monday at 10:12 a.m. Emails show a new dean and trustees firm discussed city pilot of rising South Side startup. Dropout jab rehearsed. Dana's prose was dry and devastating, her quotes careful, the kind that snag. The piece didn't call for resignations. It didn't need to. The commentary did, the way Chicago wakes up when it smells a rigged table. WBZ picked it up at lunch. By 2 p.m., my inbox held polite notes from people who'd never answered me before, and 1 letter from a law firm representing Rusk Mobility, threatening. We forwarded it to a pro bono partner whose office faced the Dirksen. "They're posturing," the partner said. "Sit tight. And if you want to talk misappropriation of trade secrets, we can talk." Sophia called me in tears, and this time they were clean. "He apologized," she said quietly. "Miles. Sort of." "What sort of?" "He said he was caught up in the moment, and that everyone knows it was a joke, and that he never meant it personally. I told him that if he couldn't see me as his equal when I was in the stands, he'd never see me as his equal anywhere. And then, I told him I wasn't going to the Maldives," she said. "I told him I was going home." She came to my apartment with a suitcase and a hollowed-out expression. We made tacos in silence. We didn't fill it. We let it ring. The next morning, she went to the lake and sat with our mother on a bench near Fullerton, the skyline doing its tricks. "He was never going to get better," Mom said, pragmatic as insulin. "But you will." By Friday, the university issued a statement. "We take seriously the concerns raised by recent reporting." Saturday, an alumni letter circulated, signed by 200 students from Pilsen, Little Village, Bronzeville, Uptown. People from neighborhoods whose kids were always told that their success required a sponsor. The letter asked for an investigation into conflicts of interest and a review of policies around vendor relationships. On Monday, Whitaker went on leave. On Wednesday, he resigned. I attended the board meeting not because I had a seat, but because I had a right to stand outside. I wore the same navy dress because clothes can hold luck. When the news broke, the sound outside wasn't a cheer. It was quieter than that. It was relief. I texted Eli a thank you that read like a confession. I texted Dana a tip unrelated to me because the best way to be a good source is to keep listening. Rusk Mobility's letter turned into a negotiation. They didn't want to fight in public any more than I did. We traded paper. We traded silence on some things and sunlight on others. We settled for a sum that let me hire 3 more drivers at full salary and expand to Uptown, where a woman named Pearl could finally keep her tiny bakery stocked enough to meet those early morning lines. The settlement also required Rusk to issue a statement acknowledging similarities in early-stage documentation and clarifying that Ms. Delgado's company is independent and in good standing with the city. It was lawyerly. It was enough. I printed it out and taped it to the inside of our warehouse door like talismans on a ship. People called me brave. I wasn't. Brave would have been confronting Whitaker at 19, suing then, blowing up my life. I was older. I was tired. I was done letting anyone else narrate. The only person who called me what I was, finally, was my mother. "You're steady," she said. "You've always been steady." It just took time for everyone else to slow down enough to see it. The day Sophia started her new job, one she found on her own, editing videos for a nonprofit in Pilsen that teaches kids how to tell their stories. We went to the Drake for tea because she wanted to sit where she'd once peeked at prom photos and imagine the life on the other side of glass. We drank from chipped china under chandeliers and laughed at how fancy it pretended to be. She wore a thrifted blazer and sneakers. I wore my CEO badge tucked into a pocket I touched like a worry stone. "You could still finish," she said softly. "School." She nodded. "You don't have to. But you could. Not for him. For us." "I know," I said. One day. Outside, Michigan Avenue was a river of people moving, always moving. That night, I walked from the Drake to the lake, to the curve of the beach where the water and the streetlight meet like conspirators. I sat on the cool sand in a dress that had seen me through a resignation and a settlement and a sister's second beginning. I took my CEO badge out and laid it beside the graduation program, which I had kept, the word Dropout circled in my mind but not on paper. A gull called. Somebody laughed 2 blankets away. A siren slid by on Lakeshore Drive and then disappeared. The lake licked the shore and retreated. It never apologized. It didn't need to. When I stood, I left the program pressed under the stone I'd used to hold it open. Not because I was done with it, but because I needed to know it could sit there a while and not blow away. The badge went back in my pocket. It was just plastic. It had never been magic. But when my fingers closed around it, I felt a steadiness that didn't belong to the badge at all. It belonged to the part of me that would not bend anymore when someone with a microphone got clever. Every now and then, someone will ask me about that screen at the arena, the neatness of the message, the way the camera found me. "How did you plan that?" they say, with awe that tastes a little like suspicion. I tell them the truth. The plan wasn't for the screen. The plan was for the silence that comes after. I wanted the silence to hold something other than shame. At Sophia's apartment, 2 rooms above a florist where the smell of cut stems is a promise. There's a photo on the fridge of the 3 of us on graduation day. My mother is holding Sophia's diploma tube like a scepter. I'm holding my badge like a joke. Behind us, blurred but present, a man with a thin beard is clapping because he doesn't know the shape of the story yet. When guests ask who he is, we say, "Nobody." We don't say his name anymore in that house. We don't have to. Sometimes I dream of 19-year-old me, walking past Tech on Sheridan Road with a notebook and a heart that didn't know yet how long a detour can be. I don't tell her not to trust people. If you stop trusting, you stop learning. I tell her to keep the receipts and keep the friends who work the soundboards and the night shifts and the clerk windows. I tell her to sleep when she can. I tell her that one day, when someone calls her a dropout under purple lights, she'll hold up a plastic badge, not for them, but for herself, and feel the exact amount of power the truth can carry. It's not fireworks. It's ballast. And on the days when the city feels heavier than usual, I drive one of our routes myself, van windows down, the map I made all those years ago unfurling in my head like a morning. Back of the yards, Bronzeville, uptown, Rogers Park. Men in aprons wave, women with lists nod. Kids chase each other across hydrants that splash arcades into the street. I think of every person who ever got told they weren't invited, and how we built a door anyway. I think of how revenge isn't about hurting someone back, but about replacing a false narrative with one so stubborn and so kind it refuses to die. I think of how, if I'm lucky, the next time someone wants to make a joke about dropouts, they'll remember the day a screen told a different story and the crowd chose the better one without being told. The truth came out, and it stayed. The silence after the applause was the sound of it settling in. The end.